The night Patricia Whitmore told me my nose would ruin her family photographs. She said it with the same calm voice she used to order tea. I was 25 years old, 5'6", and blonde in the ordinary way that comes from a bottle every 6 weeks, and a patient stylist named Marisol. I had blue-gray eyes, my father's square shoulders, and my grandfather's nose, long, prominent, and slightly crooked at the bridge. Until that night, I had never thought of it as a tragedy. It was simply the center of my face, the place where my sunglasses rested, and where my father tapped me affectionately when he said I looked like a Bennett. Ethan Whitmore and I had been dating for almost 3 years. He had proposed 6 weeks earlier on the footbridge at Whetstone Park in Columbus, Ohio, under a sky full of summer lightning. I loved him or believed I didn't. I had already imagined a small October wedding. White roses, and my father walking me down the aisle. Patricia invited us to dinner at the Whitmore house in Upper Arlington to discuss the guest list. She waited until Ethan's father went to refill his drink before placing her folded hands beside her plate. "There is one delicate matter," she said. "Ethan has a public-facing career. These photographs will follow both of you for decades." Ethan stared at his plate. I smiled uncertainly. "What matter?" Patricia touched the bridge of her own small sculpted nose. "Your profile, Claire. You are a pretty girl from the front, but the Bennett nose is severe. With the right surgeon, it could be softened before the wedding." For several seconds, the only sound was the grandfather clock in the hall. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to laugh, object, or reach for my hand. He did none of those things. "My nose?" I asked. "Please don't make this vulgar," Patricia replied. "I am offering a practical solution. Are you paying for it?" Her lips tightened. A bride's preparation is traditionally her family's responsibility. Then Ethan finally spoke. "Mom just wants everything to go smoothly." It was not the sentence itself that broke something in me. It was the relief in his voice, as if he had been waiting for her to say what he lacked the courage to say. I stood so quickly that my chair struck the hardwood floor. Ethan followed me outside, through the white columned entry and onto the circular driveway. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the trees. "Claire, wait. She doesn't mean we can't get married. She just told me I have to buy a different face before I can join your family." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She is old-fashioned. And you have mentioned surgery before." I had mentioned it once, after a photographer at work asked me to turn my head the other way for a staff picture. I had said, half joking, that maybe one day I would fix the bump. Ethan had apparently filed the remark away as permission. "Do you want me to change it?" I asked. He looked past me toward the house. "I want my mother to be comfortable with the marriage." "That isn't what I asked." He did not answer. I removed my engagement ring. My hand shook, and for one weak moment I nearly put it back on. Instead, I pressed it into his palm. "Tell your mother she can be completely comfortable," I said. "There won't be a wedding." I drove to my father's small brick house in Clintonville, through a storm so violent that the windshield wipers could barely keep up. Dad opened the door before I knocked. Thomas Bennett was 61, broad through the chest, with silver hair and the exhausted color of a man who had been telling everyone that indigestion was nothing to worry about. He took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I told him everything at the kitchen table. Halfway through, he got up and made coffee. Neither of us drank. When I repeated Ethan's words, Dad closed his eyes. "I always hoped the boy would grow a spine," he said. "Hope is not evidence." I gave a broken laugh, then began crying harder. "The worst part is that now I can see what she sees." I looked in the rearview mirror all the way here. I hate that she got inside my head. Dad sat across from me and leaned forward. "Your grandfather carried that nose through Marine training at Camp Pendleton. He built a machine shop and employed 30 people for 40 years. There is nothing shameful about resembling him. I know, but if you ever change it, the choice belongs to you, not Patricia, not Ethan, not even me." I nodded, though I did not yet understand how much those words would matter. 3 days later, Dad collapsed in the produce aisle at a Kroger. The hospital scans showed pancreatic cancer that had already spread to his liver. The doctor spoke gently, but I heard only fragments, advanced months rather than years, comfort, decisions. Dad listened without interrupting. Then he looked at me and asked if I had eaten lunch. That was his way. He had spent his life noticing everyone else's empty plate, while ignoring his own pain. I moved into his spare bedroom. During the day, I worked remotely as an event coordinator for a nonprofit literacy foundation. At night, I organized medications, warmed soup, and pretended not to hear him being sick behind the bathroom door. Ethan sent messages every few days. At first they were apologies, then they became explanations. Finally, they became complaints that I was punishing him for something his mother had said. I answered only once. You had a chance to speak for yourself. You chose silence. 2 weeks after the diagnosis, Dad asked me to drive him to Green Lawn Cemetery. We parked beneath an old maple near my grandfather Arthur's grave. Dad stayed in the passenger seat, breathing shallowly. There is something I should have told you years ago, he said. He handed me a brass key attached to a faded red tag. On the tag were the words Scioto Community Bank, Box 317. Your grandfather left more than the machine shop, Dad said. Much more, and almost nobody knows it exists. Grandpa Arthur had sold Bennett Precision Works in 1999. The family story was that medical bills and business debts consumed nearly all the proceeds. Dad's older sister, my Aunt Vivian, repeated that story at every Thanksgiving, usually while explaining why there was nothing to inherit except the family Bible and a few tools. Dad told me the story was incomplete. After the sale, Grandpa discovered that Vivian's husband, Leonard, had forged his signature on loan guarantees and used company equipment as collateral for a failed real estate venture. Grandpa paid the debt to save the jobs and keep Leonard out of prison. Publicly, he let the family believe the sale had barely covered the loss. Privately, he retained a portfolio of municipal bonds, blue-chip stock, and a parcel of farmland outside Delaware, Ohio. He didn't hide it from the law, Dad said. Taxes were paid, records were proper. He hid it from Leonard and, eventually from Vivian, because she kept giving Leonard access to everything. How much? When Dad died, the trust was worth around $1.8 million. It has grown since then. I stared at him. My father clipped coupons and drove a 12-year-old Ford. I had postponed dental work the previous winter because my insurance would not cover it. We have millions of dollars. The trust has assets. I have lived on my pension and used some trust income quietly for your education and a few medical bills. The principal was protected. Why didn't you tell me? Because secrecy started as protection and became a habit. Habits can turn into cowardice if you keep them long enough. He nodded toward the grave. Your grandfather made me successor trustee. The trust allowed me to distribute principal to you for health, education, maintenance, and support. It also allowed me to appoint the remainder to you during my lifetime. I signed that appointment yesterday with the trust attorney. I want you to know before I die, not after. I want to look you in the eye while I give you the truth. I felt anger rise through my grief. Are you telling me because of my nose? No, I am telling you, because time has stopped pretending to be endless. What you do with the money, including surgeries, your decision. But I will not have you believe a Whitmore purchased your worth. The next morning, we went to the downtown office of Margaret Sloan, an estate attorney with cropped white hair and a voice like a clean bell. She showed me the Arthur Bennett Family Trust, the amendments, tax returns, brokerage statements, and the recorded deed to 112 acres of leased farmland. The current net value was just over $3 million. Dad had executed a limited power of appointment, transferring the remainder interest to a new irrevocable trust for my benefit. He remained entitled to income and medical support during his lifetime. Margaret explained every paragraph twice, made me repeat the important parts in my own words, and advised me to hire independent counsel before signing an acknowledgement. That insistence made the inheritance feel real. It was not cash in a suitcase or a whispered family legend. It was paper, signatures, account numbers, and responsibilities. I hired another attorney, reviewed everything, and signed 11 days later. Nothing about my daily life changed immediately. I still bought store-brand soup. I still slept lightly so I could hear Dad call. But the future no longer looked like a narrow hallway with every door locked. Dad died on a cold Thursday morning in November, 6 weeks after his diagnosis. I was holding his left hand. His last clear words came the night before. Whatever face you carry forward, he whispered, make sure it belongs to the woman making the decisions. At his funeral, Ethan stood near the back beside his best friend, Noah Mercer. Ethan left before the burial ended. Noah remained. I had known Noah for almost as long as I had known Ethan. He was 28, a structural engineer, quiet without being shy, with dark brown hair and a habit of listening until people revealed what they actually meant. During my relationship with Ethan, Noah had always been careful and respectful. He never flirted with me. He never criticized his friend. That day, he carried folding chairs into the church hall, refilled the coffee urn, and drove Aunt Vivian home when she complained of dizziness. After everyone left, he found me standing beside Dad's truck. "Your father once spent 2 hours helping me replace the starter in the rain," Noah said. I had met him twice. "He treated me like I belonged in his driveway." "That sounds like him." Noah looked toward the bare trees. "I am sorry, Claire. I know those words don't hold much weight right now. They hold more when someone doesn't try to decorate them." He nodded. "Then I am simply sorry." He did not ask about Ethan, my engagement, or the rumors already circulating through our circle of friends. He gave me his number, though I already had it, and wrote beneath it, "For gutters, groceries, or silence." For the next 3 months, grief reduced my world to practical tasks. I transferred the house into my name, met with the trust's financial advisor, arranged for Dad's truck to go to a vocational school, and answered Aunt Vivian's increasingly pointed questions. At first she asked whether Dad had left a will. Then she asked whether there were safe deposit boxes. Finally, she arrived at the house carrying a pecan pie and said, "Your father was always secretive about Dad's business papers. As the eldest child, I should help sort them." Margaret had warned me this might happen. Grandpa's trust became irrevocable at his death, and Vivian was not a beneficiary. Still, the documents included evidence of Leonard's old fraud. Dad had kept the secret partly to protect his sister from humiliation. "The estate is being handled properly," I told her. "If there is anything you are entitled to receive, the attorney will contact you." Vivian's eyes moved around the kitchen. "That sounds rehearsed." "It is careful. Dad taught me to be careful." She left the pie and took her affection with her. Noah, meanwhile, made no demands. Once a week he sent a short message. "Need groceries? Want company at the cemetery? Have you checked the basement after the rain?" Sometimes I said no. Sometimes I did not answer. He never punished me for either. In February, a windstorm pulled a strip of flashing from the roof. Noah came with a contractor he trusted and stayed while the repair was inspected. Afterward, we drank coffee on the back steps, wrapped in our coats. "Ethan says you ended things because of a misunderstanding," he said carefully. "Did he send you to fix it?" "No. He asked me to convince you to talk to him." I told him I would not carry messages between adults. I studied Noah's face. "Do you know what happened?" "Only his version." "His mother suggested cosmetic surgery. You overreacted, and then grief made everything harder." The sentence felt like another small betrayal, but Noah did not present it as truth. He presented it as evidence. "Patricia said my nose would ruin their family photographs. Ethan said he wanted his mother comfortable with the marriage." Noah's jaw tightened. He left that part out. Most edited stories leave out the moment that explains everything. He set down his cup. "For what it is worth, I think he failed you. You are his best friend. That is why I am allowed to expect better of him." It was the first moment I saw Noah, not as part of Ethan's world, but as a man with a moral center, separate from it. By spring, I was considering rhinoplasty again. The desire embarrassed me. Patricia's cruelty had awakened every insecurity I had ever buried, and I worried that surgery would prove she had been right. I scheduled consultations, canceled 2, then finally met Dr. Elena Ruiz, a board-certified facial plastic surgeon in Cleveland. Dr. Ruiz took photographs from several angles and asked the question nobody else had asked. "If Patricia Whitmore moved to another continent tomorrow, and you never saw Ethan again, would you still want this operation?" I looked at my profile on the monitor. I thought about the teasing in middle school, the staff photographer, the way I avoided side angles long before I knew Patricia. I also thought about Grandpa Arthur and the face Dad loved. "I would want the bridge straighter," I said. "I would want to breathe better through the left side, but I don't want a tiny nose that looks borrowed from somebody else." Dr. Ruiz smiled. "That is a useful answer." She found a deviated septum, explained functional and cosmetic options, and showed me a conservative simulation. The results still looked like me. The bump was softened, the bridge straightened, and the tip refined without erasing the Bennett shape. I waited another 6 weeks before scheduling surgery. During that time, I met with a therapist, wrote down my reasons, and promised myself I could cancel, even on the morning of the procedure. I paid from a modest trust distribution, approved for health and support, documented like every other distribution. The cost was significant, but it was not the price of admission to the Whitmore family. It was a decision I made after the door to that family had already closed. Noah drove me to Cleveland, because Marisol, who had planned to take me, came down with influenza. He waded through the surgery, brought me home, and wrote medication times on a yellow legal pad. My face swelled until I looked like I had argued with a beehive. No one never stared. On the third day, I caught him making soup while reading the discharge instructions for the fourth time. "You know this isn't romantic," I mumbled through the splint. He glanced at me. "Good." I wore my least romantic sweater. It was brown, pilled at the elbows, and truly terrible. I laughed, then clutched my face, because laughing hurt. "Do not make me laugh." "Understood. I will discuss municipal drainage." He did, with such solemn detail that I laughed again. When the splint came off, I cried. Not because I had become beautiful in some miraculous new way. My face was bruised and unfamiliar. I cried because I could breathe through both sides of my nose, and because the woman in the mirror looked like me, after setting down a burden. Dr. Ruiz reminded me that swelling would take months to resolve. "Do not judge your life by a 7-day result," she said. That advice applied to more than surgery. Recovery forced me to live without quick conclusions. Every morning, I studied my face for changes and found new swelling instead. One side dropped before the other. The tip looked too high, then too round. Online forums offered photographs and panic in equal measure. Dr. Ruiz had warned me not to compare a healing face with a finished one. But impatience made warnings easy to forget. At my 1-month appointment, I asked whether I had made a mistake. "You may eventually decide there are details you would choose differently," she said. No ethical surgeon can promise perfect satisfaction. But today you are asking swollen tissue to provide a final answer. Give your body time. I thought I would feel confident immediately. Confidence is not a surgical outcome. It is a relationship you build with yourself. On the drive home, I stopped at the cemetery. I stood before Dad's grave wearing oversized sunglasses and told him I was afraid I had used his gift for the wrong reason. Wind moved through the new grass. No answer came, of course, but speaking the fear aloud reduced it to its actual size. When I returned home, I opened the fireproof document case Margaret had given me. Beneath Dad's will, and a folder of insurance papers, I found an envelope with my name written across it. I recognized his blocky handwriting immediately. Inside was a letter, dated 4 days before we went to the cemetery. "Claire, if you are reading this, I probably ran out of time or courage before saying everything properly. The money will attract opinions. Some people will tell you that keeping it proves greed. Others will tell you that spending it proves foolishness. They will be loud because your decisions make them imagine what they would do. Listen to professionals where knowledge matters. Listen to people who love you where character matters. Then make the decision you can explain to yourself in a quiet room. Do not turn the trust into a shrine. Your grandfather wanted it to protect life, not replace it. Make mistakes small enough to survive. Help without making people smaller. Say no without making cruelty your reward. And do not confuse resemblance with obligation. You can love the nose you inherited and still change it. You can love the family you inherited and still set boundaries. Carry forward what is worthy. Dad, P.S. If a man needs his mother's permission to respect you, return him to her." I laughed so suddenly that tears ran beneath my sunglasses. Dad had probably written the postscript first. The letter became my private standard. Before every major financial decision, I tried to explain it to myself in a quiet room. I did not always reach the wisest answer, but I learned to recognize decisions fueled by fear, display, or the need to be praised. I also began seeing Dr. Maya Foster, a therapist recommended by the oncology social worker. In our first session, I told her I felt guilty discussing a broken engagement and cosmetic surgery when my father had died. "Grief does not require every other pain to leave the room," she said. We spoke about the years before Patricia. In 6th grade, a boy had called me Eagle during attendance. At 16, I learned to angle my face in photographs. At 21, a date told me I would be gorgeous with a smaller nose, then acted surprised when I went home. None of those moments determined my decision, but together they formed the background noise Patricia knew how to amplify. "Would keeping your original nose prove you were strong?" Maya asked. Part of me thinks so. Would changing it prove Patricia won? That is what I am afraid of. Then both choices still place her at the center. What would it mean to remove her from the decision entirely? That question did more for me than any compliment. I stopped imagining 2 doors labeled surrender and defiance. I had chosen a third, thoughtful consent to a change I wanted, limited by a desire to remain recognizable to myself. At 6 weeks, the swelling eased enough that strangers stopped noticing I had undergone surgery. At 3 months, I could see the conservative shape Dr. Ruiz had promised. I placed a photograph of Grandpa Arthur beside a recent photograph of myself. The family resemblance remained in the brow, jaw, and serious set of the mouth. Even my nose retained its length, only straighter. I did not feel that I had betrayed him. I felt that I had joined the long family tradition of repairing what interfered with useful work. My first public event after surgery was a fundraising breakfast for the Literacy Foundation. I stood at the registration table, expecting everyone to stare. Most people were more concerned with coffee and name tags. One colleague said, I looked rested. Another asked if I had changed my hair. The world did not stop to certify my transformation. That realization was liberating. Patricia had made appearance, feel like a referendum. In ordinary life, my face was simply the face with which I answered emails, carried boxes, laughed at Marisol's stories, and missed my father. Noah met me after the breakfast to return a casserole dish. He looked at me for a moment longer than usual. What? I asked. You seem lighter. The swelling is down. That is not what I meant. I told him about Dad's letter, but not the exact postscript. Some jokes deserved time before being shared. He was right about quiet rooms, Noah said. Buildings tell you things in quiet rooms too. Cracks, pipes, bad bearings. Noise can hide the important part. Did you just compare my emotional life to structural inspection? Respectfully, of course. We stood on the porch smiling at each other, and I sensed a possibility neither of us named. He left without crossing the boundary. That restraint made the possibility feel safer, not smaller. Not long after the 3-month mark, Ethan appeared at my front door with tulips and the old engagement ring in his coat pocket. He stared at my face before he remembered to look into my eyes. You did it, he said. The delight in his voice was worse than open cruelty. He believed my surgery had completed a task assigned by his family. I had a subtorhinoplasty, I replied. Why are you here? Because we can start over. Mom feels terrible about the way she phrased things. She wants to host a dinner and clear the air. The way she phrased things, Claire, you look incredible. Isn't that proof some good came out of all this? I thought of Dad beside Grandpa's grave, fighting for breath as he told me that secrecy could become cowardice. I thought of Ethan in the driveway, asking me to make his mother comfortable. Some people changed when pain showed them the truth. Others waited for the pain to pass, so they could restore the arrangement that benefited them. The surgery fixed my septum. I said, it did not fix you. His expression hardened. That is unfair. I gave you space while your father was sick. You complained that I was punishing you while my father was dying. I was grieving too. You left his funeral before the burial was over. He pushed the tulips toward me. What do you want from me? Nothing. That is the point. I closed the door. Through the sidelight I watched him stand on the porch, with the flowers hanging from one hand. For once he had no mother, fiancé, or best friend to translate the consequences of his choices. He left the tulips on the step. I put them in the compost bin. Noah learned about the visit from Ethan, not me. 3 days later, he asked if I wanted to walk at Highbanks Metro Park. The trees were beginning to leaf out, and the Alentany River ran high from spring rain. Ethan thinks we are spending too much time together, Noah said. Are we? That depends on whether you want me here. I stopped beside the trail. My nose was still tender, my grief still unpredictable, and my financial life involved responsibilities I was only beginning to understand. The last thing I needed was a convenient romance that would turn Noah into a bridge back to Ethan. I don't know what I want, I admitted. Then I won't ask you to decide. Does he know you drove me to surgery? Yes, he called it disloyal. And what did you say? That friendship is not a promise to endorse every failure. We resumed walking. A family passed us with 2 children jumping in puddles. After a while, Noah said, Ethan and I have been friends since 7th grade. I used to think loyalty meant staying in the same place beside someone. Now, I think it may mean telling the truth, even if the truth ends the friendship. Did it end? He hasn't answered my calls. I'm sorry, I am too, but I made the call. You are not responsible for it. That distinction mattered. Ethan had always made his choices sound like weather systems caused by other people. Noah owned his over the next several months. Our friendship deepened by inches. We visited the Franklin Park Conservatory on a rainy Sunday. He helped me choose a financial advisor who charged a transparent fee rather than a commission. I attended a charity 5K organized by his engineering firm and discovered he was an embarrassingly enthusiastic volunteer at the finish line. We did not kiss. We did not speak in hints. We allowed trust to become ordinary before asking it to become romantic. My inheritance, meanwhile, refused to remain secret. Aunt Vivian hired a lawyer. In June, I received a letter demanding a full accounting of Grandpa's trust and alleging that Dad had exercised undue influence over a vulnerable parent. The claim made little factual sense. Grandpa had created the trust in 2001, served as trustee for 8 years, and undergone 2 independent medical evaluations around the time of the final amendment. Dad became successor trustee only after Grandpa suffered a stroke. Still, Vivian threatened litigation unless I agreed to divide the assets equally. Margaret Sloan spread the documents across her conference table. She is not entitled to an accounting as a non-beneficiary under these circumstances, Margaret said. But we can provide enough verified information to demonstrate that a lawsuit would be expensive and unsuccessful. The more difficult question is whether you want the family history disclosed. The trust file contained copies of Leonard's forged guarantees, a settlement with the lender, and a letter Grandpa had written but never sent to Vivian. In it, he described discovering the fraud and begged her to protect herself. He also explained why he had removed her from the trust. Any distribution to her was likely to be seized by Leonard's creditors or diverted into another scheme. Leonard had died 5 years earlier. Vivian was no longer at financial risk from him, but the amendment did not restore her as a beneficiary. Grandpa apparently never regained confidence that she would handle a large inheritance safely. Dad protected her reputation for 25 years, I said. If I use these papers, everyone will know what Leonard did. Only if she files a public lawsuit and makes the validity of the trust an issue, Margaret replied. We can warn her counsel privately and seek a protective order for sensitive exhibits, but you cannot control every consequence of her decision. I asked for a week. That weekend, I visited Vivian at her condominium in Worthington. She opened the door but did not invite me to sit. You brought a lawyer into this family, she said. You hired one first because your father manipulated Dad. Thomas always resented that I was older and closer to him. It was a history I had never heard. Dad spoke of Vivian with frustration and tenderness, never rivalry. Grandpa created the trust years before Dad controlled anything, I said. He had his own attorney. He had capacity evaluations. Then why was it hidden? To protect the assets from Leonard, her face went still. I did not reveal the entire file. I told her only that the trust held documentation concerning unauthorized business guarantees and the debt Grandpa paid after the company's sale. She sank into a chair as if her knees had failed. Those were misunderstandings, she whispered. There are signed records. Your grandfather promised nobody would ever know. The sentence confirmed what I had hoped she could deny. Vivian had known. Dad kept that promise even after Leonard died, I said. Now you are accusing him of stealing. He got everything. He lived modestly and preserved the trust. He paid for Grandpa's care. He helped with my college tuition. He did not get everything. He carried everything. Vivian looked toward a framed photograph of herself and Dad as children. I spent my life being punished for my husband's mistakes. Maybe you were. But you were trying to punish Dad after his death, for refusing to let those mistakes consume what remained. She began to cry, quietly and angrily. I wanted to comfort her. I also wanted to defend the man who was no longer there to defend himself. Withdraw the threat, I said. Margaret will share a confidential summary prepared by the trust accountant. You can see that the administration was proper. I will not divide the trust because you demanded it, and I will not pretend Dad committed fraud. If you sue, we will respond with the evidence. You sound just like him. For the first time, I accepted that as a compliment. Vivian's lawyer withdrew the demand 2 weeks later. She did not call me for almost a year. The confrontation changed my relationship with the inheritance. Until then, the money had felt like a strange current flowing beneath my feet. I feared enjoying any of it, as if comfort would cheapen Dad's death. With Margaret's encouragement, I created a plan that honored the trust rather than worshipping it. I kept the farmland, leased to a third-generation farming family under favorable long-term terms. I placed most of the investments in a diversified portfolio. I established an annual scholarship at Columbus State Community College for students in machining and industrial technology, named for Arthur and Thomas Bennett. I also set aside funds to expand the Literacy Foundation's mobile library program. But I did so anonymously at first because I did not want money to alter how my colleagues treated me. Noah was the first person outside the legal and financial team whom I told the full amount. We were sitting in a booth at a diner on Indianola Avenue. He had ordered pie, I had ordered fries. I slid a copy of the trust summary across the table. He read the figure, blinked once, and looked at me. That is a lot of zeros. It is. Are you safe? The question surprised me. Most people, I imagined, would ask what I planned to buy. Margaret helped with privacy and security. Why? Because money makes some people inventive. Does it change anything between us? He considered his answer. It changes the number of professionals I will recommend you consult before making major decisions. It does not change. Who eats my fries after ordering her own? I pushed my untouched plate toward him. These are clearly community property. He smiled, but then grew serious. Claire, I need to say something before this goes any further. I care about you more than as a friend. I have tried to wait until you were steady enough that saying it would not feel like a demand. The money does not create that feeling, and it does not erase it. My heart began beating hard. How long? I noticed you before Ethan did. I stared at him. I never acted on it, he continued. He asked you out, you chose him, and that was the end of the question. While you were together, I respected the boundary. When you ended the engagement, you were grieving and vulnerable, so the boundary remained. And now I am telling you the truth, and leaving the choice with you. The echo of Dad's words almost undid me. The choice belongs to you. I care about you too, I said. But I am afraid our relationship will look like revenge. Ethan's fiancé choosing his best friend. We cannot build our lives around the ugliest interpretation available to other people. You have thought about this. I am an engineer. I have thought about load paths, drainage, and the social consequences of kissing you. I laughed. And your conclusion? The structure is promising. I leaned across the table and kissed him. It was not a dramatic kiss. The waitress was refilling coffee 2 booths away, and Noah's fork clattered against his plate. But it felt honest, unhurried, and free of witnesses whose approval mattered. We dated quietly for 3 months before telling mutual friends. During that time, Noah never treated the inheritance as a shared resource. He paid his part of dinners, continued renting his modest apartment, and refused when I offered to finance a software idea he was developing with a colleague. If I ever ask you to invest, he said, it will come with a business plan, independent valuation, and an attorney who tells you why it is a bad idea. Very romantic. You knew about the drainage conversations. Our first serious disagreement came when I suggested paying off his student loans. The offer felt generous to me, and humiliating to him. He went quiet, then asked whether I wanted a partner or a project. His words hurt, but they were fair. I had begun using money to remove discomfort before asking whether the discomfort belonged to me. We talked until midnight. I apologized. He admitted that pride made it difficult for him to accept even ordinary help. We agreed that gifts affecting our financial independence required time, disclosure, and mutual consent. Love did not make us instantly wise. It made honesty worth the effort. Ethan found out about us at a mutual friend's Labor Day cookout. Noah and I arrived separately, still uncertain how public we wanted to be. Near dusk, he took my hand while we stood beside the picnic table. Ethan saw he crossed the yard so quickly that conversations stopped around him. You have got to be kidding me, he said to Noah. Noah released my hand, not from shame, but so both of his hands were visible. This is not the place. My best friend and my fiancé, former fiancé, I said. Ethan ignored me. How long were you waiting? Was this happening while we were together? No, Noah said. Nothing happened while you were together. Sure, you drove her to surgery, you were at her father's funeral. You made yourself useful until she had money. The last phrase landed like a dropped glass. Only a few people knew about the inheritance. But gossip had evidently done the arithmetic after my scholarship announcement became public. Noah's face changed. Do not speak about Claire as if she is a prize someone stole. She was supposed to marry me, then you should have behaved like someone worthy of marrying. Ethan shoved Noah in the chest. Noah stepped back but did not retaliate. I moved between them. Stop, I said. You don't get to turn your choices into a contest between 2 men. I ended our engagement because you agreed that your mother's comfort mattered more than my dignity. Noah had nothing to do with that. You got the surgery anyway, Ethan snapped. So Mom was right. The yard went silent. I touched the bridge of my nose. It had healed into a softer version of the face I knew. No, I said. I got the surgery because I chose it after months of thought and medical advice. Your mother believed changing my face would purchase her approval. I learned that I did not want her approval, even with the face she preferred. Ethan glanced at the people watching him. He had always been most aware of morality when it became public. "You are both unbelievable," he muttered. He left. Noah did not follow him. Later, as we helped our hosts collect paper plates, I asked Noah if he regretted what he had said. "I regret saying it in anger," he replied. "I don't regret the truth." That evening marked the final end of their friendship. It also began a campaign from Patricia. She called my office the following Monday and asked for a meeting. I declined. She sent an email expressing concern that Noah was exploiting my grief and financial circumstances. When I did not respond, she contacted Vivian. I learned this because Vivian, after nearly a year of silence, forwarded me the message. Patricia had written that she feared certain opportunistic people were isolating me from family, while gaining access to the Bennett assets. She invited Vivian to discuss legal options. At the bottom of the forwarded email, my aunt wrote, "I have made mistakes, but I will not help this woman make you one of hers." I called Vivian. Our conversation was awkward and brief. She admitted that Patricia had somehow learned about her earlier legal demand, probably through Ethan, who had heard a distorted version from a mutual acquaintance. She wanted documents, Vivian said. She hinted that if we worked together, the trust could be challenged and protected from Noah. Protected for whom? She did not say. People like Patricia rarely name the pocket they intend to fill. It was the sharpest, truest sentence I had ever heard from my aunt. Margaret sent Patricia a formal letter instructing her not to contact my employer, advisors, or family representatives about my private financial affairs. Noah offered to step back publicly if that would reduce the pressure. "No," I said, "that would reward the behavior. I don't want you fighting a battle just to prove something. I am not proving anything. I am choosing my life." Patricia went quiet after the letter, but I knew quiet did not mean harmless. Dad had taught me that silence could conceal fear, love, or preparation. The evidence came in December when the Literacy Foundation received an anonymous complaint, alleging that I had directed grant contracts toward businesses connected to Noah. The accusation was false. Noah's engineering firm had no relationship with the foundation. Still, the board placed me on paid administrative leave during an independent review. I sat in my car after the meeting, staring at the steering wheel while humiliation burned through me. The complaint included details about Noah's employer, my trust, and my cosmetic surgery. It described the surgery as a lavish personal expense, potentially disguised through charitable accounts. That was absurd. The trust and foundation had no financial connection, but the mixture of truth and invention was designed to sound informed. Only a handful of people knew all three details. Ethan knew, Patricia knew, Vivian knew, Margaret and the financial team knew, but the complaint's tone pointed elsewhere. I called Noah first. "I am coming over," he said. "No. Go home and preserve every email and message involving Ethan or Patricia. Do not delete anything, even if it is embarrassing. I am calling Margaret." It was the first time in the crisis that I heard Dad's steadiness in my own voice. Margaret referred me to an employment attorney, Denise Carter. Denise advised me to cooperate fully with the review, avoid direct contact with the suspected parties, and create a factual timeline. I authorized the foundation's independent auditor to verify that no trust funds, personal bills, or no related vendors had entered its accounts. Then I began gathering evidence. Noah found a message from Ethan sent after the cookout. "Enjoy the money while it lasts." Another said, "Mom knows people on nonprofit boards." Noah had not responded. Vivian saved Patricia's email, seeking an alliance. Marisol remembered Patricia calling the salon and pretending to be my aunt, while asking whether I had paid for surgery by check or credit card. The receptionist had refused to disclose anything and logged the call. The strongest evidence came from the complaint itself. Denise noticed that its attached financial analysis contained metadata, naming the author as P. Whitmore and identifying the company license for Whitmore Public Strategies. Patricia's consulting firm, a careless export to PDF, had preserved the information. We did not celebrate. Metadata could be challenged, and retaliation accusations required care. Denise sent the evidence to the independent investigator, with a request to preserve server records and trace the submission. The investigator confirmed that the complaint had been uploaded from an IP address assigned to Patricia's office. Building access records showed she had entered the suite that evening. The supposed charitable contracts did not exist. Every allegation was ruled unsubstantiated. The board reinstated me with back pay and issued a written finding clearing me of wrongdoing. The chair apologized in person. The complaint was detailed enough that we had to investigate, she said. I understand, I replied, but the foundation needs a policy that protects employees from malicious complaints without discouraging legitimate whistleblowers. Both things can be true. We worked with outside counsel to revise the policy. I insisted that the final version include confidentiality safeguards, prompt notice, an opportunity to respond, and consequences for knowingly fabricated claims. Patricia had tried to damage my career. Instead, she helped strengthen the institution where I worked. Denise advised that I had potential claims for defamation and tortious interference. Filing suit would make the conflict public, but it would also allow us to subpoena records and seek a binding remedy. I did not want revenge. I wanted the harassment to stop, my professional reputation corrected, and Patricia prevented from repeating the lie elsewhere. We offered confidential mediation before filing. Patricia rejected it. Her attorney's response accused me of using inherited wealth to intimidate an older woman who had merely raised concerns in good faith. The phrase good faith looked grotesque beside the fabricated contracts we filed in Franklin County. The complaint was restrained. Dates, statements, evidence, damages. Denise attached the foundation's findings, but kept medical details to the minimum necessary. The local newspaper never covered it, though the public docket made the case accessible. Patricia could no longer rely on secrecy while using insinuation as a weapon. Ethan called me the day she was served. You are suing my mother. My attorney can speak with hers. She was worried about you. She invented financial crimes and sent them to my employer. She did not know they were false. She created contracts that never existed. He was silent. Did you give her information about my trust and surgery? I asked. I told my mother things when we were engaged. Couples share things. I learned about the trust after our engagement ended. Another silence. This one answered the question before he did. I heard it from Tyler, he said. I might have mentioned it to Mom. She said Noah was after the money, and you wanted to believe her. He betrayed me. Noah did not end our engagement. Your refusal to stand beside me did. Everything after that belongs to the life I built without you. His voice softened. Claire, if you drop the lawsuit, I can get her to stop. You could not get her to stop insulting the woman you planned to marry at a dinner table. Why would I trust you to stop her now? I ended the call and sent Denise a written summary. An hour later, I blocked Ethan's number. Discovery revealed more than I expected. Patricia had drafted the anonymous complaint on her company computer, asked an assistant to research the Literacy Foundation's vendors, and created a spreadsheet labeled Mercer Connections. The assistant testified that Patricia described the project as protecting Ethan's future. There were also messages between Patricia and Ethan. In one, Patricia wrote, "If Claire sees what Mercer costs her, she may finally understand what she threw away." Ethan replied, "Just don't do anything that comes back on me." He had not designed the scheme, but he knew she planned to interfere. His primary concern was not my livelihood, it was his deniability. The case settled after those messages were produced. Patricia agreed to pay my legal fees and a substantial contribution to the Literacy Foundation, not from the foundation's funds or at my direction, but as part of a separately reviewed settlement. She signed a retraction, acknowledging that her allegations had no factual basis. She also agreed not to contact my employers, relatives, trustees, advisors, or romantic partners, directly or through third parties, about my private affairs. The settlement contained no admission of legal liability, which mattered to her. The retraction contained the truth, which mattered to me. I donated the personal damages portion to a fund, providing legal assistance to nonprofit workers facing workplace retaliation. I kept reimbursement for my actual expenses. Margaret reminded me that declining money did not make me morally superior, and accepting compensation would not make me greedy. She was right, but directing the damages toward others transformed an ugly episode into something with continuing use. Noah attended the mediation only when his testimony was needed. He never urged me to settle or continue. On the evening the agreement was signed, he brought takeout to my house and set the containers on Dad's kitchen table. "How do you feel?" he asked. Tired, relieved, not triumphant. "That sounds healthy. I thought justice would feel louder." He handed me a carton of noodles. Maybe justice is the part where the noise stops. I looked around the kitchen. The room still held Dad everywhere. The worn place on the floor near the sink. His handwriting inside the cabinet where he recorded paint colors, a chipped mug that said "World's Okayest Fisherman" for months. Every good thing in my life had produced guilt. How could I fall in love after he died? How could I renovate the leaking bathroom with money connected to his loss? How could I laugh? Noah seemed to read the change in my expression. What is it? Dad would have liked this, I said. The noodles, the quiet you, all of it. Noah reached across the table. I wish I could ask his permission to be part of your life. He would say, my permission is the one that matters. Then, I am asking you. Not for marriage tonight, he added quickly. Just for the next part, whatever pace you need. I placed my hand in his. Yes to the next part. That spring, almost 2 years after Dad's death, Aunt Vivian asked to meet at Green Lawn Cemetery. She stood between Grandpa's grave and Dad's with a bouquet of daffodils. I owe both of them an apology, she said. Only one of them might hear it. I don't know what the dead hear. Thomas heard less from me while he was alive than he deserved. She told me things Dad had never shared. After Leonard's fraud, Grandpa had offered to help Vivian leave the marriage. She refused and accused Dad of turning their father against Leonard. Dad continued paying small household bills from his own salary so she would not lose her home. When Leonard died, shame hardened into resentment. It was easier for her to imagine Dad as a thief than to admit he had protected her while she blamed him. Patricia recognized that resentment, Vivian said. She spoke to the ugliest part of me and expected it to answer. For a moment, it almost did. But you forwarded the email. One decent choice does not erase decades of bad ones. No, but it can be the first decent choice in a new direction. She studied me, then laughed through tears. You really do sound like Thomas. We did not become instantly close. Reconciliation built itself from small, testable actions. Vivian shared family photographs and records that belonged with the trust archive. I gave her a copy of Grandpa's unsent letter, after Margaret reviewed the decision. She read it privately and later asked if she could place it in a sealed envelope with her own response beside his grave. I did not give her half the inheritance. Money was not the price of forgiveness, but when she developed arthritis severe enough to make her condominium stairs dangerous, I offered to pay directly for a stair lift as a discretionary act from my personal funds. She resisted, then accepted under a written agreement stating that the gift created no claim against the trust. The formality protected both of us. Affection and boundaries could occupy the same room. Noah's family required boundaries of a different kind. His parents, Daniel and Ruth Mercer, lived near Dayton and had known Ethan since he was a teenager. Ruth called Noah after the settlement and asked whether dating me had been worth losing a lifelong friendship. He did not tell me about the call until we were driving to their house for Sunday dinner. What did you say? I asked. That I did not lose Ethan because I dated you. I lost him because I stopped pretending his behavior was acceptable. Does your mother blame me? She is worried. She remembers you as Ethan's fiancé, and the lawsuit frightened her. Give her facts, but don't audition for acceptance. The phrase made me smile. Noah had been listening to Dad even though they had shared only a few conversations. Ruth greeted me politely. She was a retired school secretary with warm brown eyes and an anxious habit of straightening objects already aligned. During dinner, conversation remained safely focused on weather, road construction, and Daniel's tomato plants. Then Ruth set down her fork. I hope you understand why this situation has been hard for us, she said. Ethan was like family. I understand that you cared about him, I replied. Patricia says the complaint was a misunderstanding that became a legal war. Noah started to speak, but I touched his arm. An independent investigation found that she fabricated financial relationships and submitted them anonymously to my employer. I said, the records showed she did it to interfere with my relationship and career. The settlement required a written retraction. Ruth looked down. I did not know that. I don't expect you to accept my version because Noah loves me, but I will not accept responsibility for consequences caused by Patricia's choices. Daniel cleared his throat. That seems fair. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. I am not trying to be cruel. I am afraid Noah is giving up old connections for a relationship that began in so much conflict. So am I sometimes, I admitted. That is why we have moved slowly. Noah does not have to choose between loving me and remembering the good years he had with Ethan. But he also does not owe Ethan access to our lives. Noah took my hand under the table. The conversation did not end in an embrace. Ruth asked more questions, some uncomfortable and some wise. She wanted to know whether my inherited wealth created an imbalance, whether Noah felt pressured to defend me, and whether we were mistaking shared conflict for compatibility. We answered honestly. I told her about our disagreement over his student loans. Noah told her we were seeing a counselor before even discussing engagement. By dessert, the room had softened. Ruth sent us home with tomatoes and a pie plate. She made me promise to return. A week later, she called to ask about the adult literacy program at her church. Trust began with practical conversation. Months afterward, Ruth apologized without excuses. I was so afraid of becoming the interfering mother that I spoke indirectly instead of asking you what happened, she said. That was its own kind of interference. You asked questions and listened to the answers, I replied. That makes a difference. My relationship with Ruth taught me not to flatten every mother into Patricia. Concern could become control, but it could also become understanding when someone remained willing to revise her judgment. By the time Noah and I married, Ruth and I could disagree without either of us treating disagreement as rejection. That mattered because I did not want a life built around avoiding one cruel woman's shadow. I wanted a life large enough to contain ordinary friction, honest repair, and families who learned. Around that time, the Arthur and Thomas Bennett Scholarship welcomed its first recipient. A 58-year-old widow named Linda Carver who had returned to school after the auto parts plant where she worked closed. She wanted certification in computer-controlled machining. At the small award ceremony, Linda held the certificate with trembling hands. People hear scholarship and think of 18-year-olds, she told me. Thank you for believing a woman my age still has a future worth investing in. I've thought about the audience at our literacy events, so many women who had spent their lives being described as somebody's mother, wife, helper, or burden. Dad and Grandpa had given me money, but their greater gift was a question. What will you choose when you no longer have to ask permission? I expanded the scholarship to include adults returning to education after caregiving, divorce, bereavement, or job loss. The trust remained healthy because the distributions were planned rather than impulsive. Wealth, I learned, could become another form of fear if guarded without purpose. Used carefully, it could create choices for people who had been denied them. Noah proposed on the third anniversary of the night. I ended my engagement to Ethan. He did not choose an expensive restaurant or a crowded landmark. He took me to Whetstone Park, to the same footbridge where Ethan had proposed years earlier. At first, I wondered whether the location was a mistake. Then Noah stopped beneath the cottonwood trees. I know this bridge holds an old promise, he said. I thought you might like the chance to give it a better one. He did not kneel immediately. He held both my hands and looked directly at me. Claire Bennett, I love your courage, your caution, your inconvenient generosity, and the way you steal blankets while denying all charges. I love the face you had when I met you, and the face you chose for yourself. But more than either, I love the mind behind it. I want a marriage where neither of us needs a parent, a bank account, or an audience to tell us who we are. Will you marry me? Then he knelt and opened a small ring box. I was crying before he finished. Yes, after he placed the ring on my finger, I pulled him up and kissed him. Two older women walking terriers applauded from the trail. Noah bowed as if he had planned an audience of exactly two. We waited 18 months to marry. We met with a couples counselor, created a prenuptial agreement with separate attorneys, and discussed everything people prefer to leave vague: trust, distributions, debt, careers, caregiving, children, household labor, and what would happen if love did not protect us from illness. Some friends thought the prenuptial agreement was unromantic. I found it deeply loving. It required us to tell the truth, while we were kind to each other, rather than waiting until anger translated it for us. Noah retained full ownership of his engineering business interest and responsibility for his prior debts. The inherited trust remained separate. Assets we built together would be shared under clear terms. Neither of us approached marriage as an acquisition. We chose a small June ceremony at the Columbus Park of Roses. Vivian sat in the front row beside Margaret and Marisol. Linda Carver, now employed by an aerospace supplier, attended with her daughter. The Literacy Foundation's mobile library bus parked nearby because the children from one of our programs had made paper flowers for the reception. I carried Dad's handkerchief wrapped around the stems of my bouquet. Inside my dress, Marisol had sewn a tiny piece of blue fabric cut from one of his work shirts. Before the ceremony, I stood alone in the dressing room and studied my reflection. My blonde hair was pinned in a low twist. My nose had settled completely, straighter, softer, still unmistakably mine. A faint line near the base was visible only if I tilted my head toward the light. For years I had imagined Patricia's judgment living permanently in the mirror. But that morning the mirror held no weight. It held my father's daughter, my grandfather's beneficiary, Noah's chosen partner, and a woman who had become responsible for her own decisions. Vivian entered quietly. "You look beautiful," she said. I smiled from every angle. She winced, knowing the story, especially the angle where you can see who you are. It was not a perfect apology, but it was a good blessing. Noah cried when I walked toward him. He did not try to hide it. When the officiant asked who supported me in the marriage, Vivian stood with the rest of our guests and said, "We do." No one gave me away. I arrived by my own steps. At the reception, Noah's toast lasted less than 2 minutes. He thanked our friends, honored Dad, and announced that in place of favors, we had funded a year of books for the mobile library. Then he looked at me. "Claire once told me that the best stories leave out nothing necessary," he said, "so here is the necessary part. I am here because she chose me, and I will spend my life respecting the freedom of that choice." I thought my heart might break open from happiness. Ethan did not attend, of course. I had not seen him since the cookout. Months after the settlement, I heard through friends that he had moved to Cincinnati for a new job. Later, someone mentioned that he was engaged. I felt no jealousy and no triumph. I hoped he had learned that a partner was not an extension of his family image. Whether he learned, it was no longer my work. Patricia sold her consulting firm and withdrew from several local boards after the retraction. Circulated privately among the organizations she advised. The settlement did not destroy her life. Consequences rarely arrive as dramatic ruin. They arrive as doors that no longer open because trust has been spent. Once, years later, I saw her at a museum fundraiser. We were on opposite sides of the atrium. Her eyes went first to my nose, then to Noah beside me, and finally to the scholarship display bearing the Bennett name. She looked away. I did not approach her. Forgiveness for me did not require renewed access. I had released the desire to hurt her. I had not forgotten what she was willing to do. Noah and I bought a 1920s house in Worthington with crooked floors, deep windows, and a porch large enough for Sunday breakfasts. We paid for it jointly according to the agreement we had made, using a conventional mortgage we could support from our earned income. I could have bought it outright from the trust, but we wanted one part of our life to be built at an ordinary pace. That choice did not make the inheritance less valuable. It made its role clearer. The trust funded scholarships, literacy programs, responsible reserves, and occasional family support. It did not need to perform love for us. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Rose was born. She arrived with dark hair, Noah's serious eyes, and a tiny nose that the nurse declared perfect. I surprised myself by bristling at the word. "She is healthy," I said. "That is perfect enough." As Rose grew, her nose changed. At 4, it turned up slightly. At 7, the bridge began to resemble mine before surgery. Family members made harmless observations, the kind adults forget the moment they speak them. I did not want her to inherit my fear, along with my features. One afternoon, she found an old photograph of me at 2. "Mummy, your nose was different," she said a little. "I had an operation when I was 25. Partly so I could breathe better, and partly because I wanted it to look different. Did you hate it?" I sat beside her on the floor. The honest answer required care. Sometimes I felt unhappy with it. Then someone was cruel about it, and I became confused about whose opinion I was hearing. I waited until I knew the decision was mine. She touched her own nose. "Will I need an operation?" "No. You never need to change your face to earn love. When you are grown, you will make choices about your body with good information and for your own reasons. My job is to help you know you are already worthy." She accepted this, then asked for a snack. Children often receive life-changing truths with the practical wisdom to request apple slices afterward. When Rose was 8, the Literacy Foundation opened the Thomas Bennett Family Learning Center in a renovated branch library on the south side of Columbus. I had resisted putting Dad's name on another building. He disliked attention, but the center offered adult literacy tutoring, children's books, job application assistance, and evening technical classes in partnership with Columbus State. It joined the 2 things he valued most: useful skills and an open door. At the dedication, I spoke for 7 minutes. I told the audience that Dad had been a mechanic, a caregiver, and a man who believed money should solve problems without announcing itself. I did not mention the whip. They were part of the road, not the destination. Vivian, now using a cane, sat beside Noah and Rose. After the applause, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph I had never seen. Grandpa Arthur stood outside Bennett Precision Works, beside a much younger Dad. Both men were laughing. In profile, their noses made the family resemblance undeniable. On the back, Vivian had written, "They would recognize you by more than your face." I framed a photograph and placed it in the center's workshop classroom. I am 41 now. My blonde hair requires more help from Marisol than it once did, and fine lines gather around my eyes when I smile. Noah still owns the terrible brown sweater. He claims it is historically significant. Rose is old enough to roll her eyes at both of us, and young enough to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. The trust Grandpa created has supported 46 scholarship recipients. Linda Carver serves on the selection committee. She has an instinct for applicants whose lives do not fit neatly into forms. The farmland remains with the same family, now managed by the grandchildren of the couple who first leased it. The mobile library reaches 6 counties. I sometimes wonder what Dad would think of all this. I know he would question the center's maintenance budget, complained that the dedication plaque was too large, and secretly carry a photograph of Rose in his wallet, until the edges wore white. The brass safe deposit key hangs in a shadow box above my desk. Beside it is the faded red tag marked Box 317. The box itself is empty now. The documents are secured with the trustee and archived electronically. I keep the key, because it reminds me that an inheritance is not merely what the dead leave behind. It is the moment they trust us with a choice. My grandfather left assets hidden from a man who would have consumed them. My father left me the courage to bring hidden things into the light. Patricia left me a wound that became, through no virtue of hers, an education in boundaries. Ethan left me the knowledge that affection without courage cannot sustain a marriage. Noah gives me something different every day. Love without ownership. People occasionally hear a shortened version of my story and say, "So you got the new nose, the fortune, and the better man." That version sounds like a fairy tale in which beauty and wealth are prizes. It misses everything important. The surgery did not make me worthy. The inheritance did not make me powerful. Noah did not rescue me. Each became meaningful only after I learned to choose without begging for permission. The night Patricia rejected me, I believed the worst thing a woman could hear was that she was not good enough to join someone else's family. I know better now. The worst thing would have been believing her and spending my life trying to earn a place at a table where love was measured by appearances. I changed my nose, I changed my plans. I did not change my value. And when I walked away from the man who could not defend me, I did not lose the love of my life. I cleared the path that finally led me to him.